Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Today is the 197th episode of Be With Me, 7 minutes of biblical wonder. And a couple days ago, I asked you to habit stack or event stack this podcast on another part of your life. That is, hey, when I'm in the shower, I play the podcast, or when I have a cup of coffee, I play the podcast, or when I floss my teeth, I play the podcast. And today we're going to look at a story as to why would you listen to this podcast, and why would you wonder along with me about the things that we talk about here. So we're going to look at a passage in John chapter 7 when the people in real time in the Bible kind of did the same thing. And we're going to ask, what did they wonder? What did they marvel about? So the title of this podcast is that this is a marvelous podcast. So yesterday we were on the tails of the people in the New Testament. And one person says, hey, Jesus is a good man. And another one says, no, that's impossible. Jesus cannot be a good man. And we used the C.S. Lewis arguments about Jesus being either a lunatic, a liar, or possibly the Lord himself. So today we'll ask, what did they we're going to find in today's episode, people in real time are going to marvel at Jesus, which is what this podcast is all about. So what did they marvel about? We're in John chapter 7 and verse 14. In the middle of the Feast of Booths, Jesus went up into the temple and began teaching. The Jews therefore marveled. This is John chapter 7, verse 15, and it says, the Jews marveled at Jesus. And then he said, how is it that this man has learning when he has never studied? So this is what they marvel about. How is it that this man has learning when he never studied? So they're marveling at the teaching of Jesus, and they're wondering, what is the source of this? How did this guy get like this? And then Jesus gives kind of credentials here. So Jesus answered them, my teaching is not mine, but is his who sent me. So the source of this knowledge, or this wisdom, which is like applied knowledge, is focused in the Trinity, in the Godhead. And so one of the things we can marvel about teaching is, well, where does it come from? So Jesus answered them, my teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. Verse 17, if anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own authority. Verse 18, the one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. So the people are marveling here at the teachings of Jesus. And in a sense, this podcast is a teaching podcast. And so you want to ask yourself, why would I want to event stack this podcast? Why would I want to make it a part of my life, or share it, or subscribe to it? And I was thinking about the source of the wisdom that's in this podcast. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they listened to a real estate leadership podcast, which is a great thing and helpful to them in their work. But I was thinking about the well that I draw from. I go to the Bible every day here with this podcast, which is such a luxury, whereas other podcasts maybe are on business wisdom, or everything I learned about pottery, or some interest that I have. I go to the words of the scripture, which is, the voice of God, literally in many of these cases, the history of his people. It's 4,000 years of highlights and lowlights. And so where does this wisdom come from? ultimately comes from God. I certainly hope so. And if it doesn't, stop listening, please. And so here in Christendom, we hypervalue his word because it's the source that gets us all the way back to the Lord. And I was thinking about the moment when the Lord appears to Moses. This is from Exodus chapter 3, verse 3. The Lord appears in a flame of fire to Moses. And then Moses has the decision to make, which is either to keep on walking, but no, he turns aside. And I think that's another word for marveling. He marvels at this. He says, I'm going to give a little time to this. And then the Lord notices that he turns aside, and kind of the rest is history. So verse 17 talks about discerning where is the person's who speaks to you, where is their discernment from? And this is what they marveled at. Even in Acts 17, when Paul himself, St. Paul, capital Paul, was speaking, the Bereans were of more noble character than the Thessalonians because they searched the scriptures and to see if what Paul said was true. So verse 18, whose authority is this person speaking on? And obviously this podcast has an authority that's based, I hope, I trust that it's on the Lord and not on me, and seeking his glory and not my glory. So let's talk about marveling. Marveling is not belief, but it's a step towards belief. I love people that marvel. That's why wondering is in the title. Same concept here. So if you're wondering and marveling at something in the Bible or something from this podcast, that's fantastic. Come back tomorrow and marvel again, and we'll get towards belief, I hope. So I hope that this podcast is worthy of your time. It's based on the Bible. I hope it's not about me. I'm pointing us towards marveling and wondering and pursuit. I hope it's an encouragement to you and maybe an example. I hope it's God-based, and the fun part about this now being in the gospel, it's specifically Jesus' life-based. I think you should be suspicious of people who say, hey, I've got wisdom here, because you need to ask, just like they asked here in John chapter 7, whose authority is talking and whose glory is being sought. And so from a podcast standpoint, if it's valuable and if these same criteria happen, then you event stack and you say, I'm going to make it a part of my life. I'm going to subscribe it. I'm going to share it. I will see you all tomorrow.